introduce myself once again, Jim Brett, New England Council. It's been a couple of years. I feel like I'm a young child about to go to Disney World for the first time. We're all excited to be back. We're all excited to see people, talk to each other. And it's great to have old friends, new friends here this morning. A few important people here today. You know who you are. I just wanted to acknowledge, though, Mike Skelton, who is the new head of BIA, the Business Industry Association, here in New Hampshire. We want to welcome him. We want to congratulate him. It's a wonderful opportunity to work for probably the second most powerful business organization in the area here. And we wish him much success, to say the least. Again, I just want to thank all of you for being here this morning. Obviously, people want to get back, be with other people, and the crowd here indicates that today, and we thank you. We also thank BAE Systems. We all know how generous they are, not just for our sponsorship here today. Tom Bishop, who is unable to be here, but we all know how valuable BAE is to the economy here in New Hampshire. It's one of the largest employers and also one of the most generous supporters of all corporate sponsorships here in this great area. We're proud, obviously, to call them a good friend of the New England Council and extremely grateful for their ongoing support. Before I introduce our guest today, now that we're back to the in-person programming, and today is our first in-person program of 2022. Our calendar is filling up very, very quickly. Next Friday, March 18th, the day after the Holy Day, we will host the United States Secretary of Labor, the former mayor of the great city of Boston, Walsh. We'll be back here in New Hampshire twice the following week. First for a politics and eggs breakfast, the former New Jersey Governor, Chris Christie, and then on the 21st at the New Hampshire Institute of Politics, we will also have a opportunity for Capitol Hill report here at BVI with the Congressman from the 1st Congressional District here, Chris Pappas. We'll wrap up the week in Boston on March 24th with another Capitol Hill report with the chairman of probably the most powerful committee in the United States Congress, the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, the Honorable Neal. In April, we'll look forward to events with Senator Jack Reed of Rhode Island, Congressman John Larson of Hartford, and Senator Ed Markey in Washington, D.C. And then needless to say, we're very, very excited to be resuming our Washington Leaders Conference after a 2-year hiatus. The conference will be held on May 11th and 12th in our nation's capital. Registration will open today, so we hope that you'll join us for an action-packed 2 days in D.C. And some of the speakers that we've already lined up are very, very impressive, to say the least. But today, we're delighted to welcome the Chief Executive of this granite state, great friend of the New England Council, Governor Sununu. As all of you know, he's currently serving his 3rd term as the 82nd governor of this great state. He's been named the nation's most fiscally responsible governor of the Cato Institute, delivered 3 balanced state budgets with no new taxes. And over the past 2 years, amid the pandemic, he's taken action to safeguard the health and the safety of granite staters, while also keeping the state's economy strong. As a result of his leadership, New Hampshire boasts a high vaccination rate, low infections rates, and low unemployment rates. Needless to say, we are delighted he could take time to join us today to provide an update on his ongoing work to lead New Hampshire past the pandemic and continue to drive economic growth here in this region. Please join me in giving the New England Council a warm welcome to Honorable Governor Sununu.
Good morning. Great to see everybody. That was a very nice intro. This is like, you hear intros like that, and I'm like, now the press should leave, right? Just take, that's where your notes are. Where's Josh? Oh, I see Josh Rogers over there. Josh will be reading the story. I know it's going to be a good one. I'll try to make some news. I do have to comment. I know you have your Washington Leaders Conference. Who the hell is showing up to that? Washington leadership? Are you kidding? It's a joke in itself. Oh my goodness. I'll show up. I'll come down. Being like 30 Republican governors will show up. We'll show you how to do it. Well, look, a couple things. There's obviously a lot going on. It is obviously really great to be back. There's a lot going on. What I don't want to do is just get up here and tout how great New Hampshire is. We'll be here all day, right? That list is long. We've had a lot of successes here in New Hampshire, to be sure. But we also have a lot of challenges. And some are kind of these national-driven challenges, if you will, and worldwide challenges when you talk about inflation and supply chain and fuel costs. I mean, that's just the reality of that. I think is really hitting home. It seems to, in the past week, just crossed this line where, you know, going from basically $3.80 to $4.20 in gas. Everyone just said, okay, this is really going to get out of control really, really fast. Home heating oil is the big one. The average price now is not in the fours. It's now like about $5 a gallon. So if you're, one individual filling up 250 gallons in their tank, they just spent $1,000 on home heating fuel. That hurts. A lot of folks can afford it, and a lot of folks can't. Elderly, those on fixed income. So I think those pressures are really, really coming to bear, and it is going to have a trickle effect into the economy and into where we go. Now, fundamentally here in New Hampshire, we're really strong. We really are. And I always, great, we've balanced budgets with no new taxes, but more importantly, we've balanced budgets by slashing taxes as well. What I always try to do is stay 2 steps ahead of, especially here in New England, in the Northeast, and not to pick on anyone individually, but it ain't hard sometimes to stay 2 steps ahead of all of our surrounding states, because we try to do things for the individual. And philosophically, that's really where I try to drive things. Whether you talk about education, or business, or the economy, or what you're going to do with mental health services, what you're going to do with the opioid crisis, you start at the individual and then you work your way up, as opposed to typical government that says, well, here's our system. How are we going to make sure everyone can fit into our system? No, you got to find out what the needs of those individuals are, right? So one example I talk about is school and education, right? We have some of the best education, best public schools in the country, some of the best teachers in the country, without a doubt. The statistics all show that and prove that. I'm the first governor in 25, 30 years to go through public schools here in New Hampshire. So I can tell you firsthand exactly how great they are. But they don't work 100% for everyone all the time. That's human nature. That's just the way it is. So for that 1 or 2% of individuals with the 4 walls of the typical classroom just aren't working, right? What options do they have? Not what options do the system have, what options do they have? Because at the end of the day, I go back, you might have heard me say it before, government is not here to solve your problems. No, we are here to set up as many doors of opportunity as possible for you and your family and your business, and then you choose the one to walk through, right? And so by focusing on the individual and that family or that child, not just through what happened in COVID, but maybe they're on an IEP and their special ed services just aren't really working for them. Maybe they want to, they have a passion for certain classes and they're just not being offered in that school, whatever it might be, right? 1 or 2 classes, I've seen this firsthand. 1 or 2 classes that a child can take maybe in middle school, whereas typically you had to wait like your junior or senior year, let's say, to take a class at the CTE. You can't take computer coding till your junior or senior year. It's the dumbest thing I ever heard, right? 4th graders are coding at a level better than most people in this room. And so to tap into that, they really are. And so to tap into that opportunity at the 6th and 7th grade level, instead of school being miserable, they now get excited about it. Because they're being offered something that gives them, that highlights their skills, their desires, and frankly, their self-worth. And then you build on that when we talk about workforce. You don't wait till, the idea that you're going to wait till someone gets out of 4-year college and then figure out what they want to do, maybe we'll go ask them for a resume. Old school, you're being left behind. In fact, frankly, 5, 6 years ago, people started waking up and saying, oh, we just got to make sure kids are ready at the age of 18. Then we'll ask them what they want to do because there's options. Again, that's old school. Workforce starts in the 6th or 7th grade. It really does. Because you empower these kids, you get them excited about going to school, you let them take classes that actually have real value, you let them start working towards certificates, early nursing certificates, childcare certificates while they're actually in high school. It's amazing, the fundamental change. But again, sometimes it doesn't work for everyone. We passed school choice, and we did it here in New Hampshire saying, look, you can take the state's money, the state's portion, because it's your money, it's not our money, it's your money, and you can do what you want to do with it with your child. And we thought a couple hundred families would take advantage of this. Thousands have. And we're not even through the first year yet, which shows the demand was so high. There was such pent-up demand there, and folks didn't even know that that door was ever going to be offered to them. And when you show them that door, they're running through it. And it's up 300% of the federal poverty level. Those are the families that can take advantage. So it's a lot of lower income families, a lot of inner city families, a lot of families that just don't have other options. But now they do. Now they do. And everything is fundamentally changing. And the reason that's so important, it's about the self-worth of that kid. It's about making sure they can design their own path. It's about giving them hope as they go through their entire education pathway, which is their pathway, not the government's, it's their pathway. And that's how you get and retain and kind of build a better workforce for tomorrow. And it hedges all these other problems down the road. So then you take that same philosophy for the opioid crisis. Big challenge, right? We were the tip of the spear when I became governor, right? We were, the first thing that national news would talk about, the opioid deaths in New Hampshire and the crisis that was happening right here in our home state. And in the first couple of years, it was rough. But I realized we need a whole new system. You can't keep going down the same pathway with some of these systems when they're so fundamentally broken, they're not getting results, and the idea is, well, just give us more money. We'll be okay, just give us more money. No, that's pushing harder in the same direction. You gotta sometimes have the courage to blow it up a little bit, right? Shake things up, bring in the engineers. This is the engineering aspect of it. And we designed the doorways. And people said, this is never going to work. This doorway system isn't going to work. You had the mayor of Manchester saying, no, the doorway system isn't going to work. But let me tell you something with the doorway system in this state. We are now the only state in the country, the only state that has overdose deaths down 2 years in a row. The rest of the country has doubled their overdose deaths in the last 2 years. We're down 20%. Okay, we got a long way to go, but clearly having the courage to change the system, and it wasn't just me. I had to bring a lot of folks on with me, of course. It's always got to be a team effort. But to have the courage to change that system and say, boy, we are getting some better results. We have more work to do, but we are making strides. And also acknowledge what doesn't work. Hey, we're going to try these 10 things. And politicians tend to say, I tried 10 things and they all worked and that's good, let's go on to the next thing. Right? No, you gotta nurture them a little. We tried 10 things and these 7 worked, but boy, these 3 didn't. Own that, be very upfront about it, create flexibility in your system so you can take those funds and those opportunities and pivot to something that does work. Right? It drives me crazy when you see these politicians all over the place, locally, nationally. They don't ever want to admit they might have proposed something that didn't work. Right? And that's why in Washington, they just stick to what they do. Policy, funding. Policy, funding. There's no designing of systems in Washington. There's no innovative thought down there. Right? I've been very blunt about this. Probably too blunt, frankly. But I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking. Right? Senate and Congress, what do? They vote on an ideological policy, and they vote whether they want to fund it, and then they go on to the next thing. Oh, okay. Governors, mayors, local leadership, we're the ones that are all designing the system. And we're the ones that can look folks in the eye and say, well, boy, we tried this system, did it work? Where were the barriers? Mental health is the other one I'm going to really harp on because we're making huge investments in mental health, but we're not just doing it the same way. In fact, we're doing it in a way where people go, we've never done this before. Damn right we haven't, because we haven't gotten good results before, so let's try something different. And when we did the 10-year mental health plan a few years ago, you've probably heard me tell this story before. I came into office, and within my first month, the folks from NAMI, they're a great organization, that really great advocates for mental health, and they said, just so you know, we're going to sue you. And that was like our first meeting. And they said, well, the state hasn't lived up to its obligations legally on mental health, blah, 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 blah. It's really not your fault, we get it, but we're just letting you know it's coming. And I said, hey, give me 6 months. I don't know if I think I said, give me 6 months, and they said, we'll give you 3. But I brought everybody in, we put all these ideas on the table. And not only did we just stave off a lawsuit, but we redesigned the 10-year mental health plan. And we did it not by saying, okay, the Division of Public Health will hand you a plan, and this is what we're going to do. We let families and stakeholders, mental health providers, they wrote the plan. We did public meeting after public meeting after public meeting, took all that input, and that was the plan. Because they're the ones that see where the system falls down, right? You gotta look outside the bubble. And so what's the result? We're making huge strides. We just bought Hampstead Hospital for Children. We have 2 new hospitals we're going to build here in New Hampshire, one out on the seacoast, one in Manchester. We have new providers, right? We weren't allowing outside providers and specialization. If your child had mental health issues, there were a lot of diagnoses that could really only be serviced down in Massachusetts. And God bless it, we're so lucky in many ways. Be careful. So lucky in many ways to be near Massachusetts. I mean, it is such a healthcare hub. It's a mental health hub. It's an education hub. I mean, it's a cultural hub. It's great. And this is one of those areas where we really get to benefit. But for years, we weren't letting a lot of those providers into our state. No. It was like protect the fiefdom, and we weren't getting results. So when I came in about just before the opioid crisis, we brought everyone in. We said, we're blowing this thing up. And I'm not accepting anymore that you're not going to work with them. And I'm not accepting anymore that you're just going to live in your silo. No way. And anyone who challenges me, I'll be the first one to put your name on the front page of the Union Leader and let people know who's stopping this system, because we can't accept it anymore. And then COVID happens and everything even gets exponentially worse in terms of mental health. Luckily, we were a bit ahead of the game in terms of trying to be very proactive in handling these things. So, do we have mental health issues? Absolutely. I think this country is going to be dealing with them for the next 20 years, frankly. So let's get out in front of it. Let's be aggressive about it. Let's make sure we're challenging ourselves to kind of redefine those systems, because it's all about results, right? Those guys in Washington don't have to worry about results. We do, because we were hired to do a job. If I'm not getting results, frankly, you should fire me. I mean, I really believe that. And that's the amazing part about New Hampshire, right? You always hear me brag about this. The fact that we're the only state in the country when we have this giant legislature, right? 400 of, not me, 400 of them in the House, and 24 senators and a governor, and this very powerful executive council that I was once part of and sometimes gives me heartache today, but that's okay. It's an amazing system, and if you don't like what we're doing, you can fire every single one of us every 2 years. This is your government, not ours, right? We're just hired to do a job, and we better deliver results. And so yes, it's frustrating that we have to run for office every 2 years, but it is a great power of the individual. And that's the engineering part of the system I love. It's a feedback response system. You don't just turn the machine on and walk away for 4 years and then we'll come back and talk to you later. Or in the case of like the US Senate, turn the machine on and walk away for 6 years and maybe you'll come back and talk to us, when it's election time again. We don't work that way, right? And that's great, it really is. And it's why we can stay right on top of things. It's why that live free or die spirit isn't just the 4 words on the license plate. It's because we can really adhere to it here. Now, we have a lot of folks moving in, right? We're the only state in New England that has a growing population. Every place does. I mean, we have workforce shortages, and we're not even God bless Maine and Vermont. I mean, they're losing population in droves. And I mean, they're going through some really, really hard times with workforce there. So as tough as it is here, it's even tougher in other places. But what we really have to do, it goes back to where I started, making sure on the education side, working with kids and teenagers, they are ready to enter the workforce with what they want to do with the skill sets we know that they need and that we need tomorrow. And we're providing that warm handoff, right? I don't want them to leave the state. So a certain amount of them will go, so they're wild oats in their 20s and come back. I did a little bit of that, that's fine. But at the end of the day, we need them back here. We need them back here with the skills around the mental health and nursing and all these teachers and all these critical things. And then finally, and I'm going to really open it up for questions, the big issue also, none of this works without the housing, right? We have all these businesses coming in, growing like crazy, and where's the Millipore guys? Millipore, yeah. So the guys over here at Millipore, and Millipore is an amazing manufacturer in the southwest part of the state. Small town manufacturer, but a big manufacturer in a small town. But housing is their thing. So if they're going to grow 20, 30% and add hundreds of more employees in a rural part of the state, where are those individuals going to live? And those individuals that we're looking for are the young families. And they don't necessarily want the 2 acres and a white picket fence and all that kind of stuff. Right? We do plenty of that in New Hampshire. Right? We just want multifamily housing, more communal living. This isn't Section 8 type housing of the 70s. People have this bizarre, twisted thought of that process. It's just housing for families. And it's modern housing for families with sustainable materials. So I propose a $100 million housing fund. Nothing like that had ever been proposed. I think it's actually going to get done. I'm actually surprised by that, but it's great. I'm really excited. It's something I proposed the legislature is actually going to do. It's like pack it up, go home, call it a day. Right? So the housing initiative is really big to basically provide some funding for housing, to incentivize towns to break through their permitting barriers at a local level, to speed their whole process up. There's a lot of money in there. Basically created a prize. Whatever town permits the housing faster gets the money. And someone said, this sounds like you're just creating a race. I said, you bet that's exactly what I'm doing. It's just a prize. We're awarding and rewarding those who are making the smartest investments in their towns the fastest. Because we need the housing not tomorrow, we need it today. And something people don't realize with housing is, people say, well, why aren't more people investing in housing up here? I mean, it's going to fill up. And I said, of course it is. The economics of it aren't whether it fills up and what the rental rates are. The economics are, well, if it takes 18 months to 2 years to permit a project in New Hampshire, but it takes 6 months in Massachusetts, guess what? That's where the investment's going to go. So we need to speed up our entire process, incentivize that, put a little shot in the arm, and we have the ability to do it because our economy is so strong. I cut hundreds of millions in taxes. We're getting rid of the interest and dividends tax. You know who told me I couldn't get rid of the interest and dividends tax? My dad. Oh man. He said, you'll never do it. He said, Republicans have talked about getting rid of the interest and dividends tax for years, but even Republicans would never have the courage to do that. They're so afraid of losing that money. But we cut all these taxes. We cut business taxes and meals and rooms taxes. We delivered more money with property tax relief locally. What's the result? I've tripled the rainy day fund, and I have a surplus 10 times what we ever expected. We still have too much money, right? So we're returning that money, we're making the one-time investments in infrastructure, which is great, and now we're rolling back the interest and dividends tax, which just means that we're going to stay in the confines of what we need to spend to get these new programs, to get the results that we are getting for the state, which has been great, and be very attractive to folks to keep coming into the state, because this is where they're going to land. So yes, we'll have no sales tax, we have no income tax, and pretty soon we'll have no interest and dividends tax. And I'm sorry, that just puts us so far ahead of the game of everybody else. And sometimes, on some issues, it's outrunning, you don't have to outrun a bear. You just have to outrun the idiot next to you. Right? And that's it. And I should say the word idiot. That was because I'm really referring to the states around me, but they're all there. But that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to stand out of the crowd on the East Coast, and in doing that, we're actually standing out nationally, right? We're getting a lot of national attention. Yes, we're ranked the #1 most fiscally responsible state governor in the country. We're now ranked the freest state in the country, and I rub that in Ron DeSantis' face all the time. He's #2. I said, but really, live free or die. We are ranked the freest state in the country by the Cato Institute, with individual freedoms and personal freedoms, even through all the trials and tribulations of COVID. And that wasn't easy. And we did it not by ignoring COVID. We did it by empowering the individual with lots of data, lots of information, tons of transparency, and being very upfront. And the result was people took that individual liberty and responsibility seriously, and they managed. And we have now one of the lowest fatality rates of COVID in the country, while still being the freest state in the country. We found that balance. And that's what this is all about, good balance. It doesn't mean everything we do is 100% correct. It doesn't mean we don't make mistakes. Of course we do, we're human. But at the end of the day, finding that balance and being super transparent about it, that's just how you get stuff done. I don't know, I'm just kind of going off. I get excited. Let's do this. Let's open up for questions. I can stand here all day. But I'd love to hear what's on your mind. The reason my press conferences go so long, and I say this a lot, is because I want to hear questions. If you guys are asking questions, that tells us from outside the bubble in what the real pressing issues are. And sometimes just by hearing questions, I realize, hey, we got to pivot a little bit. Oh, this is an issue we hadn't even thought of. So I'd love to hear what's on your mind. And not take up all your day. I know you have real lives to lead, but I got as much time as you do, so.
I just want to recognize a member of the state senate, I think he's still here, Lou D'Alessandro.
Hey, Lou.
District 20, I always say Lou would go in and open up an envelope. I mean, he's there. He's everywhere. We have time for a couple of questions. Governor, maybe I could just ask a couple. Some leaders in Washington, one of the qualities I admire about you, Governor, is you're so nonpartisan. There were a couple of leaders in Washington that have proposed suspending the federal gas tax because of the high price of gas. Your thoughts on whether that should be explored? Would you support it?
I'm a Republican. You want to cut a tax, I'm for it. Absolutely. Now, the challenge there is, and I think the state should look at doing it. I talked about cutting the room and meals tax yesterday, at least for a couple months, just to give people some relief, because the room and meals tax as a percentage is bigger. It's 8.5%. You get a bigger bang for your buck. The gas tax is a fixed number. So yeah, if we're paying $5 and we're cutting 22 cents, it's not quite as much. It's a good start, of course. My criticism with those statements out of Washington are, you created a lot of this problem, right? I mean, let's remember, prices were high and inflation was crazy long before this Russia stuff happened. This is exacerbating it, to be sure. But talk about not planning ahead, not understanding long-term strategy, only playing to politics. So my criticism there is a lot of the individuals that supported the policies that got us into this mess in the first place. And I was like, oh, we'll cut the gas tax. Hey, that's great. I'm a Republican. I love cutting taxes. But let's acknowledge the core of the problem at the same time. The state, there's only so much we can do. If the legislature today wanted to propose a gas tax cut, I am on it. If they want to cut room and meals tax, I am on it. Something might be temporary, but something just to spur what's happening. You know, we're an older state, right? We're like the third oldest state in the country. A lot of our population, you know how they socialize? They go to eat. Right? That's how we remain. And already we're seeing some contraction with folks saying, well, maybe we're just having some spaghetti this month. We're not going out to eat because we got to fill the fuel, the fuel tank. So if they want to cut a gas tax, I think that's great. If they want to, do room and meals, I think that's great too. We have some money. We have some flexibility. Maybe we have to hold back on 1 or 2 infrastructure projects, but it can be the difference between getting through this mess and not. I just think I think a lot of Republicans will tell you, yeah, cut the taxes, but when Washington proposes it, it's, if you're going to do it, great. And then I'll be the first one to stand up and say, great job. But it's Washington. I don't think they have the guts to do it.
You and some of your fellow governors have proposed some major energy changes to the administration. You want to talk about some of them?
Yeah, we have bigger reserves than anywhere else in the world, and we have regulations that prevent us from attacking them. I don't want to sit here and just bash on the administration, but it's so obvious when for the first 6 months in the administration they talk about shutting down expansion, they talk about all these new regulatory barriers they're putting up, they're disincentivizing in every which way fossil fuels. At one point, the Secretary of Energy, a former governor, she was asked, how do we increase fossil fuel production here? And she literally laughed for 30 seconds at the individual. There's a video of it. She laughed in his face. And it's like, look, we want to get off fossil fuels. Everybody agrees with that. But you got to take 10, 20, it's going to take 10, 20, 30 years. I'm pushing strong on offshore wind. I push strong for solar when it's done right? When it's done at the local level. You want to do solar, something like that? I think that's wonderful. And it would even cost a little more. But when you do solar power on low-income apartment buildings, or on mobile home parks, or on assisted living facilities and independent living facilities for the elderly, they all have to turn on a light switch like everybody else. So if somebody's going to pay the subsidy for this stuff that we all want the environmental benefit of it, let's make sure they are first at the trough to get the economic benefit of it. Because if it's on their unit, they're not paying the bills, we all get the environmental benefit. Instead of these mega solar arrays that take up acres and acres and acres, and only the giant developers make their money on that. Let's save a buck for those who can afford it to lease. So I think those programs are fine, but I just think there's a smarter way to do it, and that's where we kind of put our focus in.
Congressional redistricting is front and center here, the 2 congressional districts.
Thank you guys so much. This has been awesome.
We might have to make some news here. The House has passed a plan that makes the 1st congressional district pretty competitive. The second one's pretty solid Democrat. You have some serious concerns with that plan. You'd like to see some changes. The question is, what changes you'd like to see, and then 2, if the changes aren't incorporated, will you veto the bill? Yeah.
So the Democrats proposed one plan, the Republicans proposed one plan. What I don't like is that there should be a bunch of plans that are floating out there and a bunch of options. Is the plan the plans that have been proposed are all constitutional, they're all perfectly legal, they would pass muster in court. There's no doubt about that. They haven't done anything wrong in that sense. I just think it looks funky. I don't know a better way to explain it, and I always said it's got to kind of pass the smell test. Now, understanding that to get the votes to pass something is really, really hard, right? I mean, the Republicans have a slight edge in the House and a little more in the Senate. So just getting everybody on board with a single plan, knowing that there's a lot of Republicans that are now in more of a Democrat congressional district or something like that, right? So there's a lot of towns moving. And so there is a lot of consternation over it. But to get everybody on board with it is a really, really hard thing to do. I'm hoping that the Senate will take up a couple other options and plans in the next couple days. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. It is perfectly legal. So, passing it and letting it go would be just fine. But at the same time, I'm just really hopeful that they find something a little bit better. I don't think this is a make or break issue for a lot of folks, frankly. But at the same time, we have an opportunity to really get it right. Maybe I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. If you only have one shot to get it right every 10 years, I'd like them to get it righter. It's not a terrible plan, but I just think it could be better. But that's just me. I'm one person. I'm one person with a big pen, to be sure. But we'll see.
If there's no changes, you'll probably sign.
Yeah, but I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, I've really looked at it hard. I'm really not sure. Like I said, it's perfectly legal. It's a perfectly fine map in terms of its ability. But we're a purple state, and this map makes a very blue area, and Democrats love that, and it makes a very red area, and Republicans love that. But we're a purple state, and so I think everything should be a little more purplish. Periwinkle, whatever you want to call it.
Identify yourself.
Thank you, Governor, for taking my question for you here today. Mackenzie from the Alzheimer's Association. I agree the state is purple, and as our state continues to age, which you mentioned yourself, we're one of the oldest states in the country. There are a lot of people in the state affected by Alzheimer's and dementia. 26,000 right now, growing to about 32,000. We're experiencing one of the largest healthcare workforce shortages in our nation's history. It's affecting New Hampshire just the same. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about, thoughts to address long-term care workforce, direct care workforce shortages, because it's happening and it's going to continue to affect us in the coming work.
Huge. So healthcare workforce, right? And boy, have we dealt with that in a massive way. So let's talk about a few of the dynamics that are affecting it negatively, and then we can talk about some potential solutions. Negative dynamics, 2 years, they've been working 120 hours a week, and they're burnt. I mean, they're just burnt out, and God bless it, they have done an amazing job, especially here in New Hampshire. We went from being on the front of the winter surge to having one of the lowest hospitalization rates in the country within a month. We really attacked the winter surge strong, but it was because we put a lot of effort, we did a lot of fundamental changes within our system, we asked a lot of individuals, and they did a great job. Here's another very tough dynamic. This traveling nurses program, which traditionally it's a great opportunity, a great program, but we're literally paying $500 to $600 an hour for nurses that travel the country. So when a company out of Missouri comes to a nurse at the Elliott Hospital and says, hey, I got an opportunity for you. Would you like to be a traveling nurse and go to Hawaii, San Diego, Houston, and Atlanta over the next 18 months and get paid 3 times what you're getting paid today? They go, yeah, I'll do that. And they go. And all of New England is having this problem, and it's really affecting everything. I thought, geez, can we ban that program? But we're so short on nurses, we actually have to pay. Nurses are leaving, entering that traveling nurse program, and we're literally hiring back at 3 times the rate, plus all this overhead because it's managed by a big private company, to come right back into our own hospital, sometimes in our competitor hospital. It's a really wacky system. So what has happened with COVID has really put a lot of money into the system, which has then pushed basically inflation, if you will, an inflationary process on these programs that are pulling a lot of our nurses to other parts of the country, especially where sometimes there's higher need. So what are some of the solutions? First, I'm a big believer when, if you can grow your own, work to keep your own, right? And so we expanded. I doubled the number of nursing spots at UNH in the past year. We opened this great new nursing school there. We doubled the number there. We didn't have LPN programs in our community colleges. Now we have 3 LPN programs. I forced that to happen. So we're creating more nurses. But now we need them to be placed here in New Hampshire. And so the next step is really both, and it's not just nursing, it's mental health, it's social work care, it's all these real care coordinated efforts that have to happen. When they come out of our schools, sometimes they have high debt, right? We traditionally have some of the highest debt load of our students coming out of school, which is why I push so hard for student loan payback programs. If you stay and work in New Hampshire, the government will help pay down your student loans. It's not free college. I don't think this whole socialist thing of let's make all colleges free, that's the worst thing you could possibly do to post-secondary education. And we can talk about that if you want. But the idea of stay here, work here, and we'll help pay down those loans. We'll actually give you a giant cash bonus and incentive. Incentivize them to stay here. Make sure our hospitals are working with those students at their freshman and sophomore year. Making sure our nursing programs, again, aren't just for seniors in high school, but freshmen and sophomores can get involved in those programs as well to get their initial certificates. Working with the Red Cross, expanding their programs. Making sure our urgent care centers, which are booming all over this state, they're attracting out-of-state nurses as well because they're providing kind of this new 21st century level of care. It's not just your primary care physician in your hospital anymore. There's now middle-of-the-road options that are really out there. So all of these pieces need to work together to kind of make a robust system. When you have a system that's working well, you get a good reputation, and hopefully we'll start drawing some folks kind of back in over the mix. When you make investments in mental health hospitals, we're doing huge one in Hampstead for kids. 2 other mental health hospitals are going to be built. State's making a big investment in both of those. And part of that deal is we'll build them. You got to bring in the specialization in the workforce, right? We'll become that center of excellence, if you will, for that. The VA, right? Certain doctors are licensed by the VA. Veterans only sometimes want to go to VA type doctors. So let's not ignore that population as well, and making sure the expansion with this VA Veterans Campus that I'm proposing up in Franklin has those types of skill sets as well. So all of those things have to mix, but you got to grow them and retain them. For a place like New Hampshire, it's probably the best way to make sure that you're you're keeping your system as robust as possible. But nursing is going to be a shortage here in New Hampshire, long-term and acute care nursing for the next 10 to 15 years. So we got to get on it.
If I could just
A lot of
follow up
competition.
on her question. You have an awful lot of group homes, residential homes, and you also have people who have been, have some serious disabilities, who are living at home by themselves, who are unable to access a personal care attendant because of the low wages. I mean, I've heard cases where individuals have said they tried to get their son and daughter in a program, but the program says, we'd love to take them, but we don't have enough staff to take care of them because the staff is getting $13, $14, $15 an hour, and Dunkin' Donuts is giving them 18, and Amazon's giving them 20. We have to find a way of saying to these PCAs, the personal care attendants, you are a professional. You have a responsibility to take care of somebody's life. Why are we giving them such low wages? Have you looked at that?
Sort of. And what we've looked at, home care is, in so many cases, home care, you get the best care, the best quality care, the longer, longer life. Obviously, some folks have to kind of go to a long-term care facility eventually, especially in those tougher years. You know, one thing that this country, has not done very well, and I think there's a huge opportunity, especially with insurance companies, is you have loved ones that want to stay home and care for their parent because they're going to get better care there. Not so much in the Alzheimer's space and the dementia space, but with other acute needs. But they can't afford it, right? They have to go get a job. They have to go outside of the house. But they're going to get better results with lower cost if they could be reimbursed effectively as a nurse. Think about that. Like if the insurance company were to pay a loved one that wants to stay home the same type of cost that they would otherwise pay to put them into a long-term care facility, they're going to save money by investing in that individual to take care of that loved one. And you're effectively reducing the need on workforce there. So internal home care, that's a really nascent thing. I mean, we've been doing it for years, but I think we're just on the precipice of saying, look, this is really where a lot of long-term care and home care and acute care, especially for the elderly, is going. So whether it's insurance companies or Medicaid or whatever it is, opening those reimbursement streams up, which right now have been very restricted. You have to hire an outside company as opposed to a loved one that can just provide just as good quality care at a lower cost and get a better result.
Questions? Angie O'Connor?
I really have appreciated your refreshing and very fact-based, honest remarks this morning. As the former chair of the Mass Department of Public Utilities, I hope this isn't unfair question, but do you have any thoughts on given the regional benefit, the resurrection of the Northern Pass line, hydro line from Canada?
Oh, yeah. Look, I love the Northern, yeah, maybe getting all that very cheap hydropower out of Canada was a good idea. I mean, come on.
Just a thought.
I mean, the fact that they stopped that line, we're paying for it right now. There's no doubt about that. Now, they are trying to resurrect it through Maine and do their pass down through Maine, and I think that's great that they're doing that. But New Hampshire had a great opportunity to make the right investment, to bring power here and the whole 9 yards, and they refused to do it. So will it be resurrected here in New Hampshire? Not in the short term. I wish I could say it was. If Hydro-Quebec wanted to come down and really, I don't want to cast blame, but that project got screwed up in the very beginning, 10, 12, 15 years ago, because they didn't go to local towns, they didn't work with the locals, they didn't understand, working with locals at a fundamental first step level. And then when they realized that, and working with more closely with Eversource got it, some of the damage had been done there, and then the politics really didn't work out. Right a little shortly before I became governor, and those changes, frankly, those individuals didn't get changed out fast enough. But that project would be phenomenal, and I hope folks realize you can't just go all or nothing. Energy is a complex thing. You can't just make your decisions on energy based on ideology. You have to base it on immediate and long-term strategic need. We all know where we want to go long-term, but you cannot ignore the short-term because people simply can't afford it. It's March, guys. This is when prices are supposed to be the lowest. Things don't get resolved. What's going to happen around July 4th weekend when we usually pay the highest prices? That's when our spike comes. We're not even at our spike level. So I think the scariest part is what's going to be happening in the next few months. And we just, we've been cut off from our from increasing our number one source of oil. And obviously I don't need to, everyone has heard the stories. The idea that we're negotiating with Venezuela and Iran and for oil, it's baffling. It's like we're in bizarro world. But this is what happens when you just govern on ideology. Ideology doesn't work on either side. You do not fight extremism with extremism. I tell that to hard right Republicans as much as I'd say to the hard left socialists, right? You have kind of these anti-government folks you have anti-government, hard right 5% on one side, almost joining with the Antifa shut it down group on the other. It's really bizarre, the alliances that are being made here. For different reasons, really, but they all come to the same conclusion. Government shut it down, we're right, you're wrong, and if you're not with us 100% of the time, there's no place for you. For some reason, both sides have given the microphones to these lunatics on either side, but they really don't represent the 80% of us. We might have very strong different pathways of politics in this room, but it's not extremism that wins the day. In fact, it's just the opposite. That just jams everything up. And unfortunately, some folks get scared of extremism for political reasons. Energy is just one of those areas where this really plays itself out very strong, and America's paying the price right now. So, there's got to be balance in everything you do.
Becca Gould, American Tower Corporation.
Thank you. You may have just addressed my question, but now at least I know my question is welcome. So I'm Becca Gould. I represent American Tower, but I started my career with Senator Dole. So I just wanted to ask you about the party. I mean, both sides are having great divisions, and what do you see happening in the Republican Party, and what do you see among those?
Well, I won't say it's just the Republican Party. I think both parties are going to come to some type of balance. I really do. Is it going to be back to where it was? Not for probably 7 years, depending on who becomes the next president. Think of it this way. President Biden, I believe, and I think a lot of folks would agree, was elected because he was seen as the most reasonable, moderate Democrat that had relations on both sides of the aisle, in Congress and the Senate, so to finally bring some folks together to actually get stuff done. And he's failed. I mean, he just has. I mean, I didn't vote for the guy, but boy, I think we're all hopeful that this is where we're going to go. But unfortunately, we've become even more divided and partisan. And that does start with leadership at the top. I mean, the buck stops here, right? You have to take responsibility at some level for that. So unfortunately, that just hasn't happened. So depending on where we go with the next presidency, I think there has to be balance. And with that can come a force of hands across the aisle. I talked about this a little bit yesterday. I don't mean to repeat the story, but it's so true. Today, the New Hampshire legislature is back in the State House for the first time in almost 2 years. It's really incredible. And the reason even in New Hampshire, where we're fairly purple, you've seen such partisanship. The most important tools that bring bipartisanship together, that force it, have been taken out of the system because of COVID. And I'm not kidding when I say this. The number one tool of that is the cafeteria. It's the cafeteria. When the legislature, 400 of them, had to sit in their chairs, 6 feet away from each other, eat their lunch in their laps. There was no socialization. You came in, you sat down, they did their job in the big field house, and then they went home. There was no walking in the halls. There was no chit-chat. There was no going down to that cafeteria and over a tuna sandwich talking about your kids and what's going on. And by the way, have you looked at HB 522, whatever that is? I don't know what that is. And they chat. And they don't, when they sit in the cafeteria, they don't sit and party just, they really sit with across the aisle. And so that type of socialization has been stripped of us because of COVID. Now it's back. And I think I stopped talking in New Hampshire, and I hope across America, as we do more of this, even across this table, we don't know each other's politics necessarily, but we're just chatting. And that tends to bring the temperature down and the extremism down. In Washington, it'll likely stay. They haven't figured it out. But at least on the state and local level, I'm very hopeful. And that's where the best politics come from. So from the party, if the party is willing to, we're talking to the Republican Party, start with our fundamentals. We believe in local control. We believe in the power of the individual, not from the top above. So let's get back to doing that, right? And stop just focusing on what happened in 2020, even just worrying about who might run for president in 24. None of that matters, right? For Republicans, we got to win in 22, right? I think Democrats have to do the same thing. Start at that local level where you're seeing more bipartisanship, more result in getting stuff done, and let that be your model to float all the way up to the top. Maybe I'm dead wrong, but I'm not.
Ken Sheldon.
Ken Sheldon, Bank of America. Floating up on the Hill right now is a bill for cannabis legalization. That buried in there is a potential for a state bank. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm not pro-legalizing weed, but I've always said now is not the right time because we were at this real pinnacle of crisis in terms of the opioid crisis. We now have a system that knows how to handle it, that has flexibilities, that's getting actual results, so that's very encouraging. Maybe part of the reason is, every state has legalized marijuana within 1,000 miles of us, and every state is having a major drug crisis, to the level that we were, whereas our model is actually getting results. Is there correlation? Yeah, there might be. So is now the time to do that? I don't think so. I'm not sure. I'm going to look at that honestly. I'll tell you this, the bill that is being proposed in New Hampshire to legalize it, it's the right bill and the right structure. So it basically sells marijuana the same way we do our liquor stores. It has a state bank to manage the cash flow because that's one of the complex problems. It's one of the most innovative ways to do it, and it's the best way to do it in the country. So if you are ever going to do it, do that bill. Is now the time? I'm not sure yet. I'm looking at it closely. I know people want it, but I also want people to realize the results that we have achieved on the messaging around drugs, the messaging around opioids, the importance of having the system that fundamentally works for those that are dealing with addiction and recovery. And there's no doubt there is a correlation there. I just don't want to screw up these great results, and so that's what I'm most concerned about. Because let me tell you, other states are looking at us on how we handle drugs and opioids and gateway drugs and marijuana and alcohol, and they're saying, how are you guys doing it? They want to be our system. So is it right that we just defer to theirs? We don't need the revenue. To say, well, you can get more revenue. I don't need revenue, guys. I'm cutting taxes, right? So to do it to legalize more drugs for money, I mean, let's just talk about the ethics of that right there, right? That's a bad idea there. I think it's going to ultimately happen in New Hampshire. It could be inevitable, right? It could be. And so if they're going to do it, I just hope they pick the right system. Hi, how are you?
Hi, Governor. Amy Carnevale, Kate Gates. Since we're talking about the legislature, I wanted to flag a couple issues for you and get your reaction if you have any on technology issues. There's some pending legislation that deals with privacy issues in the name of protecting consumer privacy. We kind of follow on the heels of what California has done on privacy issues and really create some unintended consequences for technology companies. So that's pending right now.
Okay.
And then the second is on facial recognition technology. So I think that's been sent to study, but the New Hampshire State Police testified against that for the concern about law enforcement and their ability to use that technology to solve crimes, in particular crimes against children and narcotics trafficking across the border. So I wanted to flag a couple issues.
Sure. So I don't know the specific bills, but I'll say, look, privacy is a very big issue in New Hampshire, and on both sides of the aisle, and rightly so. I think we do it pretty well. Sometimes it gets a little extreme, to be sure, and it can cause other roadblocks, but that doesn't mean that you can't overcome with them. The facial recognition stuff scares the heck out of a lot of people, right? I mean, we have it on our phones, right? But when you start getting the government involved in all of that and how that information is being used, you know, and the kind of the social engineering that you see happening in places like China and all of that. I'm not saying that that's coming here, but that's one of the fears. Are we gatewaying ourselves into that type of mentality 10 and 20 years down the road? I don't know. I'm not sure if that's a legitimate argument to not, use good technology. I'm an engineer. I'm a tech guy, to be sure. But I do appreciate people's hesitation on it. It can absolutely get abused. And it can get abused not just by big tech companies, it can get abused by the government, to be sure. So I appreciate their hesitation. I'll take a look at those pieces of legislation, but I definitely appreciate the hesitation I think we can all agree, we all have to accept we are giving people tons of information about our personal lives and we don't even know who they are and how they're using it. And we kind of accept it, but it doesn't mean it's right and it doesn't mean it's not scary to a lot of folks. It's just, if you want to function in this world, there's a lot of that already happening. I don't know if the government getting involved is the best way to do it. Huge benefit to it in terms of the criminal aspects of it, to be sure. But yeah, it's tough.
Question in the back, anyone in the back?
All right, come on, you got me here. Go for it. Give me your best one.
Hi, Governor. My name is Jack Moriarty. I run a policy nonprofit called Ownership America, and we're focused on employee ownership. And we're focused not only on bringing businesses into the state, but also what happens when the baby boomers that built those businesses 30 years ago are ready to retire. In New Hampshire, there's 15,000 businesses owned by baby boomers. And the research shows that if they sell to a competitor or a private equity firm with investors in San Francisco or London, those jobs and all that hard work and investment get shipped out of the state. So I'm curious how you think about employee ownership as a potential retention strategy. And the research shows that this workforce turnover problem, if you have employees with a stake in the growth of the business, that can be a huge difference.
I love it. I love the concept of employee ownership. I really do. I mean, you got to get businesses and hope, like you said, 15,000 baby boomers to really understand the opportunity there. Does it mean maybe a little less on the profit margin on the liquidation, when you finally, your cash event, when you sell your company? It might, but it also means retaining your legacy and all your hard work, and you're doing it right here.
Hypertherm, absolutely.
Huge, there's just an awesome example of a homegrown local company, monster company, could probably sell out for billions of dollars or whatever it is, but they believe in their employees, and they're going to not just reward their employees, but ensure their legacy there. So I think it's great. I mean, the government can't force it, of course, but anything to promote that type, because, look, I'm going to take this conversation a little bit different. People ask, where's the workforce, right? We have a lot of people say, I can't find these young people to work in my restaurants. Where'd they go? Well, some of them have taken themselves out of the workforce, and I can explain why in a minute. But some of them are still there, but they are working for Google, and they're working for Amazon, and they're working for Facebook, and they're living at home, but working for a company out in California. They're actually working, but they're not part of our more traditional local small business workforce anymore. Those companies are hiring tens and hundreds of thousands of individuals, and they're right in our own neighborhoods, and we don't even know it. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it fundamentally changes our workforce dynamic, and what it really means is you're getting this almost a polarization in our economy where these giant companies are so powerful, they're so big, I don't want to call them too big to fail, and they're hiring so many folks that they can afford to pay 3 or 4 times the amount for a local business, eat them up, assume them. They might not make a whole lot of money on it, but they get their product lines and they get their marketing and all of that, and they get their employees. So the allure of these giant companies buying our small local businesses, especially international companies, is absolutely huge. Because all these international investors want to be here. I mean, they just do. They're begging to come in. The number of businesses I can tell you that have said, I said no to the Chinese that wanted to buy my business. I said no to the Irish that wanted to buy my business. The Irish are coming here very strong, which is very good. But buying the businesses isn't necessarily what we want to see. We want to see investment, but employee-owned or locally owned businesses are still going to drive the strength and that backbone of our economy so we don't become nascent like all these other states.
Maybe one more question?
Thank you, Governor. Peggy Gilmore, Credit Strategies. As you know, there's a federal study on expansion of commuter rail up to the Capital Corridor. Federally funded, and the results will be available in January of 2023. There's a current bill in the legislature that would prohibit any state funding on any aspect of commuter rail, passenger rail, planning, anything, that I think will be heard today in the House. I wonder what your thoughts might be on that.
Yeah, look, I was reading my comments yesterday. You saw those. And my comments weren't I'm not anti-commuter rail. And I don't think you should pass a bill that says the state will never put a dollar into it, right? That's basically killing the project because the state will always have to put some money into it some way. So no, I'm not for that at all, and that should be killed. If we're going to do commuter rail, you have to understand the cost, right? So there isn't some federal grant that says the New Hampshire Capital Corridor will get X dollars. That doesn't exist. It's not in the IIJA. There are grants that are kind of amorphous at Department of Transportation that we could potentially ask money for. But understand the Capital Corridor will cost somewhere in the ballpark of 5 with the new inflationary costs. It was $300 million 2-3 years ago. So that means it's probably $450 to $500 million today. Okay, I don't know where that money's coming from, right? That the state ain't going to build that. I mean, that's just there's no way. So what is also understandable? What's the purpose of that train? Okay, nobody is taking that train from Massachusetts to come and go to work in New Hampshire. No, the real purpose of that train is to allow people to live in New Hampshire, but work down in Boston. It's a commuter rail down into Boston. Pre-COVID, that had a lot more validity than post-COVID, because guess what? They're all working remote. I mean, if you're living in New Hampshire and your office is in Boston, chances are you're working remote right now, right? So few people actually make that trip. And so you're going to convince 1.4 million people to put up all of this hundreds of millions of dollars in tax dollars for the 2,000, maybe 2,000 people a day that take that train. That's a hard ask of everybody else, right? So I'm not saying it doesn't have value, but how it gets paid for in its initial, upfront money, that would have to come from some giant federal grant. The subsidy that New Hampshire would be required to spend on that is somewhere in the ballpark of $13 million, maybe more. I'm not sure of the inflationary aspects there. I don't think there's a ton of inflation there. So that $13 million has to come from somewhere. For example, Maine uses all their CMAQ funds for that. We use our CMAQ funds for local buses. Local buses are way more important than the Capital Corridor. They take the elderly to the grocery store, the elderly, to the downtown to see their doctor or whatever it is. Local buses have a lot more value in terms of what we're getting for our subsidy than a capital corridor. So we got to figure out where that money would come from. So no, I think the state always has to be willing to put up some money for it, but let's understand the dollars we're really talking about here. And if the federal government wants to come in and be a partner, that's great. My controversy that I started yesterday was, who's going to run it, right? It would likely be the MBTA. I mean, really, that would be the actual rail car provider and manager of that, because it's coming out of Massachusetts, it's connecting into their lines. Have you seen the management at the MBTA lately? Have you seen their bottom line? The billions in debt they have, the horrible management, and just completely mismanaged. They are. It's cronyism at its worst. So no, I would not say, hey, can't wait to do the Capital Corridor and bring those guys up here to, be in charge. No way. So those dynamics really have to be worked out. The study will be done in January. I think there's opportunity there, but it ain't, hey, let's just build a train. Sounds great. There's really results and implications, and not just on taxes, but it's such an immense amount of money. I think it'll get done eventually, but we just got to really work out. I'm curious to see what the plan says, but I think we really got to work out, what the realities of it are and what the benefits are, and appreciate this post-COVID world with remote work. We want them to live here, and a lot of them live and work and stay here. They don't need to go to Boston anymore. So what problem are we trying to solve? I guess that's it. And I'm not saying the problem doesn't exist anymore, and the opportunity doesn't exist, but it's clearly not at the level it used to be. So that has to be brought into your analysis and your calculation.
With that nonpartisan,
I'm a strong conservative Republican, but I try my best just to call the balls and strikes like you see it. I think that's what we all want, right? And yeah, when my own party does something stupid, I'll tell you. But I think Republicans have done a great job, a phenomenal job in New Hampshire, right, with all the successes that we've had. And so I'm very proud of that, just to be a little bit partisan. But if anything, my real criticism is Washington. And it isn't, I'm not running for office down there, but we should all stand up and say, what the F, man? Like, we hired you to do a job. Give us some, sorry.
this is Lent.
Sister Paul is sitting right in front of me. I get frustrated. I do. And I know you guys don't want to hear me rant on like this, but I'm going to anyways. I'm the governor. And the way I justify is this: the last 2 years has been really hard for every one of us. Every single one of us. Our businesses, our families, the insecurity of COVID, our health, all of that. Scary, scary times. It really has been. And the politicalization, and it couldn't have come at a worse time in terms of politics, the polarization, it drives through our entire country. And so we all have a lot of So when we hire someone to do something, please, just give us some results. Understand that we're in a new world that doesn't want that kind of extremism, right? And I take it personally. I've been on that stage, you've seen me, every week, sometimes 4 or 5 days a week, taking every question possible, every criticism, every bit of it. I got protesters, lunatics outside my house screaming at my kids. Trust me, I'm not saying woe is me. I don't ask anyone to cry for me. But let me tell you, I've gone through hell and back. But this job is it's bigger than me. It really is. And I want every elected official to understand when you are elected, they elected you because the job is bigger than yourself. You have an immense responsibility, but also an immense opportunity. And that's what I don't think they get in D.C. And I don't care whether you're Republican or Democrat. I think we all agree. We hired you to do something. Please deliver. Stop being jackasses. Excuse me. Seriously. Just deliver something. It might not be what I love, but it moves the ball forward. I might not love every piece of it, but it moves the ball forward. And you never beat extremism with extremism. That drives more polarization, and the 80% of us that are frustrated with that just, we get more frustrated. So frankly, fire them all. I really say, just fire them all and start again. You can't tell me, let me end with this. You can't tell me that if you took 100 members of the U.S. Senate and replaced them with the 100 individuals on this side of the room right now, we wouldn't get better results. We would. There's no doubt about it. I don't know who any of you, but there's no doubt about it. I don't care my opponent. There's no doubt about it. Because those individuals would go forward with a fresh mind of the responsibility that they're being charged on. Not about the money and all that kind of stuff. Just start with a clean slate, and holy cow, would this country move forward. And so that's the mentality I want people to have. Not that they're all bad people. They're good people. They're very good people. They're just a little lost. They're a little lost. And it's New Hampshire. Hopefully they'll take a page out of our collective book, and hopefully we can show them a way.
Before we just end, I just want to acknowledge, you mentioned in your remarks about mental health and how important it is to address that need. I think of Judge Broderick here. He spent a career, a lifelong advocacy on parity and equity on this issue, and he's really brought it to a forefront here in this state.
That was like therapy for me. I appreciate it. That was really great.
Just got to overcome your shyness. I don't know.